Malala, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. This Q&A session is being watched mainly by adults who are willing to develop their professional, social, emotional and technological competences, as well as become better human beings. And as someone who has transcended the importance of education and formation to another level, you really are somebody who we hugely admire. So thank you so much for being here to answer our questions today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
I think a great place to begin would be the beginning. So can you tell us a bit about your life history and when you realised the importance of education?
So I have mentioned my story many times. I was growing up in the north of Pakistan in this beautiful valley called Swat Valley. It was a spot of tourism. But I was only 10 years old when everything changed for me because this group called the Taliban started coming to our valley, and they started imposing their so-called Islamic laws, which were completely patriarchal and against women. They banned women from going to markets. They bombed more than 400 schools, and they banned girls' education. So if you were a girl, you were not allowed to go to school. And that was the time when I realized that education was more than just reading and writing for women and girls. It was about their empowerment. It was about their emancipation. And the Taliban were against women's rights and equality. And they knew that in order to stop women from having opportunities and from having sort of those ways of empowerment, the best way was to prevent them from accessing school. So they had figured it out, and that's when I realized that I needed to speak out. My father was already an education campaigner. He was joining protests. He was speaking out to media, and I would walk with him as a 11-year-old girl, and I would participate in the protests. I would speak to media. I also volunteered to appear in New York Times documentaries. I also did a blog for BBC, and I was sharing my diary. So this is what activism was at that time. You know, it felt like we were just, you know, speaking to these cameras and these people, and we just did not realize what the impact of that was going to be. And at that time, you feel like it's just one small step. Like, what is this going to do to bring change? But with time, you realize that you can build a lot of pressure. Civil society can join you. You can put pressure on the government, on other key leaders to listen to your voices. And at least people realize that nobody is silent, that there are people who are concerned about the situation there. They want peace. They want women's rights to be protected. So that is my story in short. And since then, I've been campaigning for girls' education. And you know, everybody knows that then I was attacked at age 15, and I was brought for treatment to the UK.
She is the Pakistani schoolgirl who took on the Taliban.
If they are saying that we are Islamic people and we are Muslim and we want Sharia law, so first of all, I will show them Quran, what Quran says. Quran didn't say that girls are not allowed to go to school.
The daughter of a Swat Valley school principal, Malala Yousafzai had become a high-profile campaigner for girls' education. For that, on October the 9th, 2012, she was targeted by the Taliban, shot in the head on her way home from school with friends.
When we saw the gun, we started screaming, Kainat says. He asked, "Who's Malala?" I don't think anyone told him, but he recognized Malala and started shooting.
The 14-year-old activist was evacuated to the United Kingdom, and as she battled to survive her injuries, the attempt on her life was widely condemned. Rallies and vigils were held around the world.
Malala is near and dear.
And people joined her in speaking out.
She's a role model for every girl in this world.
She was very confident. She was a very brave girl, and we all pray for her.
And I think we as a nation are very proud of her.
Malala had become a global icon. And to honour her cause, the United Nations declared November the 10th Malala Day.
I am adding my voice to the messages from over 1 million people across the globe. Education is a fundamental human right. It is a pathway to development, tolerance, and global citizenship.
A right that Malala continued to exercise, even from her hospital bed.
She told me on phone that please bring me my books of class 9 and I will attempt my examination in Swat, board examination.
The schoolgirl still faces many months of recovery in the UK, but her voice has been heard and continues to echo.
I want to spend my life serving people. I will be a social activist till my death, and I want to be a politician in future.
But since then I realized that I'm in a place where I cannot just fight for myself and girls in Swat Valley, but I can fight for girls all around the world. So I started Malala Fund, and I'm campaigning for all those 130 million girls who are out of school to be in school and have access to safe, quality and free education.
And you have recently graduated from Oxford University. Congratulations. Tell us about your academic experience at the university and how that impacted on your life and how it's transformed you as a person.
So while I am campaigning and fighting for girls' rights to education, I was also receiving my education, which I just completed last year in the time of a pandemic. And I'm the first year of 2020 COVID, the COVID graduates. So I received that title as well. It was such a great experience to be in university, and it was for the first time that I was living on my own without my family, just as everybody else. I was really excited, trying to explore, making friends and just enjoying a social life. And they say that, when you are studying in Oxford, you have to decide between having a social life, studying, or sleep. You can't have all three. You have to pick two. And I was like, I couldn't even have one of these, so I just picked the social life. I was not having enough sleep or studies, but it was important, when you realize that you don't just learn from lectures and books, but you also learn from the people around you, from your professors to your friends. And I just learned so much in those 3 years. It was sort of a difficult ending because we were graduating in COVID times, and I had to take my exams at home, and I graduated at home. But this was the case for, hundreds and thousands of students. But I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to study there, and I was studying in this beautiful college called Lady Margaret Hall, and it was the first women's college in Oxford, and it was started in the late 1800s, and before that, there was no college for women. And it just shocks you that it was just 100 or so years ago that women were not allowed to be in college, and then even when they were in college, they were getting the education, but their degrees were not acknowledged. They were not given the degrees. They were not able to sort of claim that they have been graduated, and it was much later that they were able to study normally. Just the simple right of studying and graduating, which we take for granted now, that was not the case for women just 100 years ago. So it's really important to then appreciate the struggle of women a few decades and centuries ago, that they have fought for us. Now that we are in this place, we can study. They have done incredible work for us to be in this place.
And when you're choosing a major, it's a complex decision, isn't it? When you're choosing what subject to study, if you have the opportunity to do so. Can you talk me through the process of how you decided to study philosophy, politics and economics at Oxford?
So I think in the US and in other countries you can do like minors and then you can do majors, and some universities are very flexible with allowing you to explore multiple topics and courses. In the UK you have to pick your degree, so you can't study everything else. So I wanted to do PPE, which is philosophy, politics and economics, because that's like one of those classic degrees that Oxford offers, and I really like the subject as well. I enjoy philosophy. I was already interested in it. I love studying economics, especially macroeconomics, learning about unemployment, inflation, and how do we keep the economy going, and politics, yeah, of course, it's another interesting topic. So these were like my favorite topics. And then I loved science, but I just could not imagine myself, studying science at university level. So yeah, this was the degree that I picked, and I graduated with that.
Congratulations. And
Thank you so
it's the
much.
icing on the cake of already a lifetime of achievement. You've achieved so much at such a young age. You got your Nobel Peace Prize at 17. How do you cope with the pressure, both what society puts on you, but also the inward pressure that you must put on yourself?
There is pressure from society, and it could be pressure on you for some good things, that you feel like you should act in a good way, you should do good stuff, but also it could be a negative influence as well. You could be asking too much from yourself. You could be a bit more sensitive to what you see on social media. My approach is that you should take care of yourself and follow what your gut instincts tell you. But I do have that internal pressure, the pressure that you have within you, because you have made a commitment to yourself that you want to play your role in creating a world where all girls can have access to education. And I always think about the moment when I did not have that opportunity to be in school. And at that time, I wanted the world to speak for me, right? You question the world, why is nobody speaking? Does anyone not care about the fact that girls can't have access to school? And that's when you realize that, that when you are in a better position, when you have the privileges and when you have the opportunities where you can do something for others, why not do that? Because there could be someone in exactly the same place as you were. So I think about those hundreds and thousands of Malalas out there who need a voice. So there is that pressure, but other than that, it's important to take care of yourself. But yeah, there are times when there's a lot of work to do, and I was still a student while I was traveling, and I was doing my advocacy meetings. I was meeting world leaders and asking them to increase their finance for education, and I was making trips around the world, going to Nigeria and Iraq, and then the next morning I would be there in my classroom, studying something about, cells in biology or something in chemistry, including on the day when I won the Nobel Peace Prize. I was literally in my chemistry lesson, and we were learning about just atoms and these things. And all of a sudden, my school's deputy head teacher calls me, and she says, I need to talk to you. And she usually calls you when you are sort of in trouble, you have been a bad student. So I was a bit worried. I was like, what have I done? And when she said that, Malala, you have won the Nobel Peace Prize, I was in a complete shock, what has happened. But as soon as, they called the school assembly, and I said a few words and told them how important education is. Soon after that, I went back to my class. I was like, I'm not going to leave school right now. I'm not going to go for any press conference or anything, because the award is for education, right? So I need to complete my education for the day. And when I finish school, then I can go and, handle media and give a statement and whatever I'm supposed to do. So I finished my day, and I went back to my physics class. So that's, so it was important for me to be a student, to be a girl of my age, and to and to remember that I should be like a student. I should finish my school day and live the life that people my age are living.
What are the main changes that access to education brings to a person's life?
Education can actually transform an individual's life. And when it comes to a girl's life, the impact of education is enormous, especially if you are living in a patriarchal society where you face misogyny, where opportunities are limited to you just because of your gender. Education provides you with the tools and with the means through which you can have access to opportunities which you otherwise may not get simply because you are a girl, simply because you are a woman. And in many places, education has become a means of protection for girls, to protect themselves from early child marriages, to protect themselves from the pressure of society, expecting them to behave in a certain way, expecting them to get married early, expecting them to just listen to their families. So when you are educated, you are in a much better position to know about your rights, to know about the fact that you can earn for yourself and that you can decide to marry later in your age, and that it should be your decision and nobody else's decision. So, along with that, when you are educated, it allows you to have the opportunity to be financially independent. In many places, for a woman, firstly she is dependent on her father's family, and then when she marries off, then she becomes dependent on her husband's family, and it sort of goes back and forth, but you are always told to be sort of dependent on somebody else. So education provides you with the means through which you can become financially independent as well. But these are just like individual level advantages that education brings. Education also has benefits for the communities, because when a woman is educated, she can look after herself but also her children, so we can have a healthy society. If a woman is educated, she has a job, and that allows her to then marry later, and then have sort of a more well-planned family, and to have less kids, which helps her, which helps our family, and sort of which helps our economy as well. We can continue in a more sustainable way for our future. And along with that, when women are in the workforce, that brings more jobs, that adds, that brings more money into the economy. We have done studies that shows that if you invest in the education of girls, it adds up to $30 trillion to the world economy. So there are economic, there are social, there are political advantages when you educate a girl.
I mean, the Malala Fund's Full Force research in 2018 points out exactly that, not only social but economic gains when we talk about gender equity in the labour market. In your opinion, how can education help achieve greater equal rights at work, and what impact does this have on society?
So we already know that, if a woman already has limitations in society, she has to go through many more barriers than, if she were a man, right? If these are like two completely different paths that these two individuals have, and just because your gender is different, you're going to have more struggle on your way. So education is something that allows women to be in a place where she can have access to so many opportunities which otherwise she would not get. So I always think about the life of a girl if she does not have access to education. And as I mentioned earlier, like for many girls, when they're not educated, firstly, they may not even know that they have equal rights, because society has told them that they do not have equal rights, that just because of their physical appearance or just because of some social norms, that they are weaker, that they're not capable of making decisions for themselves, that it is the man who has to decide what is good for her. So with education comes awareness, and I think that's the first step towards equality. Then with education also comes opportunities, and that, that allows a woman to be in a place where she can be in a slightly better position to have access to the opportunities that she wants. Like, we do know that education does not, address all the issues. It's not that, a woman receives a degree and then all of a sudden she's getting equal pay and she can have access to any job and she's not discriminated anymore. There are still barriers in society. There are still these sort of conscious and unconscious biases that we have, and we know that structurally, currently, the society is patriarchal in many places. Our institutions are patriarchal. In many places, in many companies, whether it's individuals or some algorithm making decision, we know that it shows bias sort of towards men and against women. So there are still things that need to be fixed, and in that we need more deliberate actions, and we need to sort of deliberately change those things. But education is one of the key ways towards ensuring that that women are in a better position.
Okay. And social inequalities mean that not everyone has access to the same types of jobs. So not everyone can become a scientist or a teacher or go into a world-changing profession. What role does access to education have in balancing these opportunities, in creating more of these world-changing jobs for women, for girls?
I think, firstly, it should be the choice of a woman and a girl, what they want to do in their life. But we need to recognize the role that that social norms and that what we see around us play in making us decide what we want, right? For example, when I'm a girl in school and I see that I'm told that a girl is only supposed to be a nurse, a teacher, a doctor, that's it. She cannot be a scientist. She cannot be the prime minister of a country because those are like sort of so-called men's jobs, or she cannot be in the army. She cannot be, driving a tank, or, how we have these stereotypes. So I think, it's challenging those social norms is important. And I think in that we need role models. We need examples of women. So I think, I personally really appreciate all that women have done for us in the past, who have become like the first, the first woman to go to space, and the first woman to put her step on moon, and the first woman to become a scientist, the first woman to be the prime minister of a country. And still, we still have those lists. We still hear she's the first woman to become the CEO of a multinational company. And I think we need more and more sort of role models like that. So, and we need to hear this more. So it is no longer a news to us. It's no longer, a thing that, okay, it's the first woman to become a billionaire or something, that we normalize these, this world where there is equality and it's no longer a news. But along with that, we also need to be looking at, the role that entertainment and the news industry is playing around us, and the impact of that. What we see around us sort of forms our concepts and our ideas. So it really has an impact on us. Sometimes some of us question it and we are like, oh, I see this, but it shouldn't be like this, so I'm going to change it. And for some of us, it's often that we don't realize, and we sort of subconsciously accept society like that. So I think it's, for me personally, it's important that we break some of these rules and see and try to be more ambitious in creating a world where there is equality. But I think role models, examples that play a key role, and sharing your stories play a key role. So women need to hear more about women. I was looking at coding, and I saw like how in many places, and in many sort of in many schools of coding, people are not often taught about the role of women in coding. And if you see like how when you look back at history, and you know that yes, women have been part of coding and women have been part of the computer science, but their role was never recognized. It was never appreciated. So we also need to sort of look back at history and see how the stories have been told to us, because it's not that women didn't exist and they weren't taking any interest. Regardless, despite the fact that they had these barriers, they still made it to that place, and they played a key role in all industries, including coding and technology and many others.
I mean, on the subject of coding, this is something that you told Tim Cook during your recent conversation with him. Why is it important to know how to code, and what impact does that have on other areas of your life particularly?
I love coding and I have always been curious about it. My little brother, he does coding. So, it's often associated as a boys thing, right, to code. And I personally doubted myself many, many times that I cannot code, it must be hard. But there was this sort of rebel inside me who was saying that, yes, you should try it. Why is it that you are all of a sudden supposing that you can't do it and it's only your brother who can do it, or it's sort of a boys thing? So just that idea that, sort of unconsciously I was telling myself that I can't do it pushed me towards trying it at least. And I think it's good to try it. It's good to at least see it and know that it's not that hard, firstly. I know in the beginning, like when you see all the symbols and all the words, it can become really confusing. And when you start trying, it doesn't mean you have to become a coder. Like, you don't have to become a coder. It's just understanding the concept and just understanding how the language of computer works. And sort of you realize, like, we are surrounded by technology these days, from iPhone to watches to TV screens to so many other things. Like, how do these things work? And so it's important that that we question these things, but it's super important for women and girls to also see their role in it. And women have been part of coding in history, and they have played such a significant role in helping us have the technologies that we have today, and women can do much more. So, but also when you see the absence of women and the absence of ethnic groups and the absence of, like, sort of diversity in the way this coding works, you realize, like, it's biased, right? When you don't have the representation of all the voices, you end up with just very few voices, and whatever they produce is very limited, and it's limited to one specific group, the group who is sort of, on the table, who is making those decisions. So even, like, when we look at the coding language, there are biases in there. But when women are part of that work, we can ensure that it is more inclusive, that it looks at, women and girls as well. Because, if women are not there in that place, then sort of those biases continue, and we may not see more women taking interest in it. So when women sort of make that ambition, it can have a huge impact on making it more accessible for girls.
Absolutely. And on that basis then, do you think to become better professionals we should all understand coding, or at least have a greater understanding of technology generally?
I would recommend it to everyone that they should try coding at least once. And it's so easy because a lot of these videos are available on YouTube. You can do it all by yourself. It's like learning any language, right? So, you just try to familiarize yourself with the words, with the concepts of it, and with time you realize, like, it starts making sense, I would recommend it to everyone, but especially to girls. Do try at least one lesson in coding.
Good advice. but what impact has learning coding had on other areas of your life?
I enjoy coding, but I will be honest that I found it hard initially. And there are moments when you are like, oh, this is getting a bit too complicated now. Maybe I may not understand it. But, with time, you sort of get used to it and you realize that it is sort of a lot more fun. And the thing I really enjoy about coding is sort of like how you get introduced to this sort of new language of how computers and technology work around us. Now, one of the most beautiful moments in coding for me is when my brother comes to my room and he sees that I'm doing coding and I know the concepts, and then he asks me questions. So I really love it, I'm a girl, he's a boy, and we're talking about coding, and it's no longer the thing that only boys can do it. And my brother is also learning that at the same time, that his sister can also do coding.
What difference does academic study mean to our professional lives?
What difference does it make, or does it mean?
What does it make to our professional lives? What does it bring? What changes does it bring to our professional lives? What difference does academic study bring to our professional lives?
So, I personally, I studied philosophy, politics, and economics, and that was sort of my academic life. I am, I'm an education activist. I am still figuring out what job I want to take, and it's, you try to connect the two, and I'm like, I'm not really using economics in my work, or I'm not really using philosophy in my work, and I'm not using the IR topics that I was studying about, the Cold War or something else. But I think it's, for me, like, there are two things. One is the content and the information that you receive in your academic studies. That is important. But along with that, it's also the skills that you develop, and those are the skills of learning. And I was so grateful that I got to study at Oxford, because they help you in developing independent learning skills, which are important, because we are living in a world where we are receiving new information every day, and things are changing, things are evolving. So we need to be in a position where we can process information, where we can assess information, especially now that we are living in a world where we are surrounded by social media and there's a lot of fake news. And on social media, it's very difficult to figure out what is fact and what is not. So when you are in a position where, in your academic life, you have developed these skills where you can process information and you can figure out, whether it is credible or not, whether it's plausible or not. So for me, even in politics, like when you listen to a prime minister's speech or a president's speech, like looking at the plausibility of what they are saying, like does it make sense or not? So those things are always very interesting to me. I think along with that, I think in professional life, again, you can bring in these skills. If you are a doctor, I think you do need your academic education. But if you are, an entrepreneur, you may not need as much of your academic education, but you would need the skills that you have developed there.
Let's talk about the Malala Fund. You are working in 8 countries, including Brazil. Tell us about your work in Brazil, and also explain the main goals of Malala Fund, please.
So my father and I were activists in Swat Valley, and so we recognized the power of the activism at the local level. And when we started Malala Fund, the goal was clear and simple. It was to ensure that all girls can have access to education. But we know that it's not limited to just one country. We see that there is discrimination against girls, all around the world. So we are working in 8 countries where we see that there are the highest number of girls out of school, but at the same time, there's also a gender gap, a gender disparity in access to education. And Brazil is one of the countries where we work, and we also see how there are sort of minority groups where girls are less likely to reach to their, to reach to college level, to complete their 12 years of education. And our focus is, in Brazil, we are focusing on the indigenous communities and on the black communities of girls because of the difficulties that they face in accessing education. They are less likely to complete their schools. They are more likely to drop out and to they're facing far more barriers when it comes to access to schooling. And we work with the activists in Brazil there who are focusing on these communities, but they're also pushing for national level policies to ensure that the government the government does not stop support for education. There's a financial commitment that we need for education. And I'm really grateful to the work of civil society in Brazil. They play a crucial role. And I think for me, like, I may not have answers to how to solve problems in Brazil, but I know that we can work together with the civil society. We can work together with the girls' education activists to create a society in Brazil where girls can have access to equal opportunities. And we need to ensure that we are reaching out to girls in the indigenous communities, in the rural communities, because they are facing more problems and more difficulties. They need attention. And they cannot be ignored. So this is the work in Brazil so far.
Let's talk about books. What books have had the most impact on you and why, in a professional sense?
I love reading books, and recently I have become part of a book club as well called Literati. So I get to read novels, fiction, and I like nonfiction as well, biographies. My all-time favorite book has been The Alchemist. That was one of the first books that I read. I also read, A Brief History of Time, and I used to just love physics, even though I had to read that book like 2-3 times just to understand it. And I'm sure if I read it again, I still won't get it. But that is something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy books by women, and because the books in literature, especially in history, have been limited to men, and we don't see many by women, but it was because of the constraints that women have been facing, or because their work has not been recognized. So it's great to see that we have women authors, and they're writing biographies and novels and fiction, and I love reading their books. Recently, I read 50 Words for Rain. It's a book that is set in Japan, and it's about this young girl, and she is, she's very little, and she's trying to understand where she is, what is her place in society. She is, she doesn't know who her dad was and where he is, and how her skin color is sort of slightly different than everybody else that she sees in her community, and how she's then treated differently because of that, and how she is trying to, find that identity for herself. And many other books, like, from Aftershocks, that was another one by Nadia that I really enjoyed. But I think in terms of like the professional work, I read articles as well. I like keeping an eye on the news, and I like to read about the economy and what's happening in politics, and so that's interesting always. I have read Winners Take All and Factfulness, and those books provide like different kind of perspective of how the world works and what is fair and what's not, and how happy we should be about the progress we are making. But yeah, I enjoy books, and I always think about, writing a fiction or a novel or a book, and I feel like I have some stories in my mind, but I don't see it right now, but in future, why not? Why not? I'd love to be a novelist.
You talked earlier on about the importance of having people that girls admire, people that inspire. I mean, you inspire so many people. How important is learning from the people we admire, such as authors, scientists, and entrepreneurs?
I think role models play a key role in your life. I personally have been inspired by the struggle and the journey of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, and and Bata Khan, who is a Pashtun, political hero of ours who fought for freedom against the British, and Benazir Bhutto, because she was the first female prime minister of Pakistan, and she, was not just shattering the glass ceiling, but she was, sort of, breaking the sort of the steel blocks right in front of her. So, these are. It's not that they are ideally perfect people, right? We look at Gandhi and other people, and when you read their whole history, you may not find that they were all sort of so perfect, but they, the work that they have done for freedom, for equality, for democracy, it is applauded, and you can look at it you can look at the role of that individual and who they were, but you can also look at the work that they have done slightly separately as well, and you can learn from that. You can take an inspiration from that. How to start a movement, how to fight for a cause that you care about. And one thing that I have learned is that it's really important to be resilient, to be consistent, and to not give up too soon, because it takes time. And if you want to change the status quo, the people that you are challenging would want you to get tired. They would want you to give up soon. So as soon as you give up, you sort of already failed in your mission. You may not, when you are in that struggle, yes, you may not see the goals that you want to achieve that soon, but do not consider that as a failure, because that is part of your journey. So I think it's important that you keep on working hard, because you need to remind, the system that you're fighting against. The goal is to ensure that that they know that you are not going to give up, that you are on this mission, and that you are gonna make that change for as long as you are there and you are alive. And that's the commitment that I have made for girls' education, that for as long as I am alive and I'm here, I will fight for it till the last day, to ensure that we create a world where all girls can go to school. There are disappointments. You are like, every year these leaders, they don't make the financial commitments that they are supposed to make. Every year we have to wait. 130 million girls are out of school. We heard that number 4 or 5 years ago, and the number is still the same. So why is nothing changing? And yes, we are doing campaigns. So we have pushed for a lot of changes, and that have improved so many things. And at least people are now talking about girls' education. When I think back about 7 or 8 years ago, when I first started my campaign, I remember people were not even mentioning secondary education of girls. But the reality is that is the stage where many girls drop out of school because of the pressure that they face from their family, from the society. They leave their school either because their education is not considered important, or because they're married off at early ages. They do not have the secondary school. So many barriers are there. But the focus was only on primary education. So, but at that time, you're like, maybe nothing is sort of changing. But when you look back, you do see that you have seen a lot of progress. And if you hadn't been campaigning, it could have been worse. So you may not see the full results yet, but do remember that you're already making progress. And if you stop working on it, maybe that you are in a place where things just remain as they were, and not even a tiny bit changes.
And in terms of your own goals, what is next to come for you, academically, professionally, personally?
My own goals, this is a hard question, because in COVID times, it has really slowed down things for us. And for me personally, because I graduated last year, and just like every other graduate student, I was hoping that, I would sort of, not go back and live with my parents, but I'll sort of change my life, live maybe sort of on my own. But the pandemic was like, no, I'm going to send you home. And so I've been with my family for a year and a half now, which is strange, like, post-university, living with your family. But I love it at the same time. I don't have to worry about making breakfast for myself or my laundry or anything else. Everything is done for you. Like your parents just look after you and they treat you like a kid forever. Even though I'm 24, like they still treat me like a kid. And sometimes I'm like, I'm a spoiled child now. And sometimes I'm like, it's good. If they're doing it for you, have fun, enjoy. But I think for me, I'm just excited about what's next and what's ahead. I don't know much, what that is, but I'm really excited about the work that we do for girls' education. I think that, we have already seen huge progress. And what gives me hope is the work that girls are doing. We see girls activists around the world. They are challenging gun laws. They are talking about climate change. They're telling leaders the truth. They're not scared of anyone. They're like, this is science. These are facts. We don't care who you are, but we want to live in a safe world. We want our future to be protected. Like climate change is going to impact us and our kids and our grandkids. So, we cannot delay the work because because every day it makes things worse. So we have, activists like Greta, and when I see these, girls like Greta and Vanessa and so many others who are fighting for their rights, who are fighting for clean air, who are fighting for protection, for safety, for reproductive rights, and so many other things, like that gives me hope. And so whatever it is in future, like I'm excited for it. I want to see young leaders. I want to see these young women changing the world, and that shall happen. And I want to see it in every corner of the world. And and like in Brazil and in every place where we see young girls and young women, changing the world and making it a better place for all.
How can we best prepare to have meaningful and successful careers?
I think it's up to the individual to decide how they define success for themselves. I feel like, we have been told a lot about what success means. To some of us, it has been told that you have to become a billionaire or a millionaire to become successful, or you have to be the CEO of a company to become a successful person. And somehow these are like sort of the concept that have been floating around us about success. But I think for me personally, I think it's an individual's choice and it's an individual's decision. For me, when you define success for yourself, it's important that you see a purpose in that for yourself, that you connect to it, that you relate to it, and at the same time that you enjoy it, that you feel like it is part of you. It defines who you are. For me personally, like when I look at a painting or some sort of like, I listen to beautiful music, I'm like, this is incredible. I wish I could do that, and sometimes you're like, maybe I should give it a try, but I know I can't do those things, right? So for me, like, it's being in a place where you're actually good at those things, but also that you enjoy those things as well. So I personally stay away from things where I feel like they do not reflect me, and that is not me. I don't feel like myself. But yeah, like I'm still, even though I've been doing the work in education for a long, long time, like I can't believe it's more than 10 years. It's like a decade and a half. But I would still say that I do not have enough experience in sort of career building yet. And I don't know like how we are going to define it for ourselves. Like, I don't know what career means for me in the next 10, 20 years. But I also don't feel the pressure to choose a career, which might be a good thing in some ways because, with this generation, they feel like you can easily change your mind. The opportunities are there. The world is changing. Like we didn't have social media, for instance, and today, like social media has brought sort of new roles and and new opportunities. And we see a lot more people like becoming entrepreneurs and really believing in themselves. And they want to become like, business people, but at the same time, they care about the environment. They want to become sort of responsible people in society. So I think it's important that you connect to the work that you are doing, and you feel like it's part of you and that you enjoy it.
Malala, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. We wish you the very best with your future.
Thank you so much. It was so nice talking to you.
Olá, vamos agora rever os principais pontos vistos na aula. Malala é uma líder que dispensa apresentações. Ícone da educação e ganhadora do Prêmio Nobel da Paz, é um nome eternizado por sua resiliência, vontade de aprender e defesa dos direitos de crianças, jovens, mulheres e seres humanos no geral. Essa luta pelo direito de estudar, se desenvolver, evoluir, se tornou para o mundo inteiro uma representação de uma determinação invencível e universal. O que temos a aprender com isso? Tornar-se um líder requer conhecimento e aprendizagem, o que, por sua vez, requer capacidade de aprender, algo que ao longo da vida, por sua vez, vai requerer resiliência, continuidade, determinação. Malala é talvez o maior símbolo que existe desses 3 elementos que estão no nome do curso. E ao longo da aula, podemos conhecê-la como pessoa, profissional e acadêmica, e ainda decifrar conhecimentos e competências que ela observa como essenciais. Entre eles estão comunicação, autocuidado, autonomia, inovação, busca por conhecimento, capacidade analítica, resiliência, perseverança. Na próxima aula, vamos ver Leandro Carnal, um dos maiores pensadores e professores do Brasil, falar de um assunto que ele entende muito, learnability, ou, em outras palavras, capacidade de aprendizagem. Até lá!
I am deeply concerned about the situation in Afghanistan right now, especially about the safety of women and girls there. I had the opportunity to talk to a few activists in Afghanistan, including women's rights activists, and they are sharing their concern that they are not sure what their life is going to be like. A lot of them remember what was happening in the 1996 till 2001 time, and they're deeply worried about their safety, their right, their protection. They're worried about their access to school. And we have already seen news reports that many girls have been sent back from university. A lot of them have been asked to get married, at age 15, 12. This is actually an urgent humanitarian crisis right now that we need to provide our help and support. We cannot just, look at our screens and not do anything and just get into the politics of what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened. And that is something that, that we will do at some point. That is going to be part of our future work. But right now, we need to make sure that the people of Afghanistan are safe.